Love the music. Just waiting to see if Brent is going to join us.
I don't think he can join today. He agreed to stay up very late to do some Namada engineering, backlog clearing, and as part of that contract, I agreed that he could sleep. So
All right, fair enough. What about Adrian?
that one I don't know.
Let me check. I'll send a message.
What's up?
Hey, that was quick. Okay, great. Hey, let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna we did do this once already. We're gonna pretend we didn't. So there's maybe some. If you listened to the first one, or at least you got the first half, we had some technical difficulties, so you might hear a lot of the same stuff and wondering if you're having deja vu. But rest assured, this has happened before, and it's going to happen again. I'm here with Christopher Goes and Adrian Brink, both co-founders of Namada, Anoma, Heliax, and the Anoma Foundation. Yeah, we've had a pretty busy last couple of weeks, and things are just getting busier. Excited that we're moving I think, fairly quickly now toward mainnet. Just we've got some, things to talk about around this proposal, this balances.toml proposal. I'm excited to do this space together and discuss some of this and some of the other updates. Maybe you could start with a round of introductions. Christopher?
Yes, absolutely. Also, I just wanted to do some kind of quick check. Could people react something if they can hear this
Good thinking.
sentence? It doesn't matter what you react, just react anything. Oh,
okay. I see
got one reaction. Come on, people. Are you listening to this Twitter space and jogging, or listening to this Twitter space? And,
I've seen
other things you could be doing. Okay.
I see. There we go.
Some core in there. All right. I just wanted to do that quick test. Again, I'm Chris.
Bring excitement.
I am partially responsible for all of the things that you don't like about Namada's token economics, but only partially. And I worked on IBC before. Namada uses IBC, and I'm excited about that. What else? Something that not a lot of people might necessarily know is that actually one of the reasons I first started to seriously get into crypto in the first place was because I heard about Zcash, and I thought one of the critical ingredients to actually make this technology useful was zero knowledge proofs, so that people could have practical data protection. And once upon a time, I wrote a block explorer for Zcash. Called Zchain, using the .in domain in a weird and probably slightly culturally transgressive sort of way. Hope not. So yeah, once I wrote a block explorer, that was a long time ago. Now I'm here.
And you were Anon too, right?
Yes, and I really would love to be Anon again. We will see if that happens. It is not feasible in the current world for various reasons, mostly related to civil resistance, but I remain hopeful.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah,
how's it going?
I'm Adrian. I work at privacy preserving tech and intents and things like this in distributed systems. I originally got into this space because I was working on censorship-resistant e-voting protocols to help people using their national IDs to vote, to be able to orchestrate elections without the sort of necessary involvement of the central government. So I think the only useful utility of this space is decentralized coordination. And if the thing is not decentralized, the utility of it drops to zero pretty quickly.
And you get as Christopher's implied, you guys don't just come out of nowhere. There are a lot of Anons spamming stuff about scammers and whatnot, but we,
Yeah, no, I mean,
you guys
okay,
know.
like I got into this on like Ethereum in 2016, and then joined Cosmos, built up that stack for a long time. Me, Chris, and Our built one of the very first proof of stake validator companies in the world called Cryptium Labs. When everyone thought proof of stake was never going to work. I don't know if people still remember this, but like in the beginning of 2018, no one thought proof of stake was going to be a thing or was had any reasonable chance of working. Um, so no, I've been around.
Yeah, I met you in 2018. Yeah, you probably don't remember because it was just a brief
No,
interaction.
I
We were
do.
talking about the cause. Oh, really? At EdCon?
Yeah, in
We
Toronto.
were, yeah. Whoa. Funny.
Best
Yeah, we were
EdCon ever,
pretty.
in my opinion.
It was
I just
amazing. It
remember
was
you
really
as that person. Sorry, now that we're having this very heartwarming discussion, I just remember you as that person on the Cosmos forums. I was like, finally someone kind of reasonable is showing up. And then I wondered who it was for a long time.
yeah, I mean, I was kind of a dick. I think I like really just came in to like to really put fire under people to like explain themselves and their decisions and speak truth to power kind of thing.
But okay, my one complaint is that Cryptium Labs made one and exactly one Cosmos Hub governance proposal. I think it was proposal number 7. And we went to all of this effort to like format the proposal in LaTeX. So it showed up as this beautiful PDF. It had everything organized. It looked so like, I don't know, it looked like the Cosmos Hub was a well organized, SEAL team or something. I don't know if SEAL teams use LaTeX, probably not, bad example. But that didn't get like, I was hoping that would be memed into existence and it didn't work. So I'm sad.
I feel like I was delayed, like I didn't do my homework because I think I came in doing Cosmos Hub governance work after that. But yeah, yeah, maybe I should intro myself. I'm Gavin from Knowable. I was on the Figment founding team. I was actually the first employee at Figment. I also started Figment Capital with Lorian, and then Jim came in later. James is running it now. He's done an amazing job. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to go my own way to, because I really liked this thesis. I liked what Figment had done as being, a core team for the graph. And I was like, I had to really encourage the Figment to go this way because I thought it's a really great opportunity to do something beyond staking. And I think that it's good for everyone to have multiple core teams, not just one founding team being responsible for everything. So, I really wanted to pursue this, and we weren't pursuing this further with Figment. So this is why I started Knowable, and we're a co-contributor core team for Namada, and we're trying to attract others to do the same because I think it's a really great opportunity, and I think and it's just there's so many potential wins to be had rather than like right now we have a lot of mercenary capital and passive. People will buy a token and then they'll kind of wait, or they'll scream on Twitter, devs do something, or like they'll then there are teams that are just set up to go from one team to the next that has recently done a raise so that they can kind of get paid and then move on. But what I'd really like to see is people setting roots down, like being actually real members of the community, and like longer time horizons to pursue the success instead of just like launching new token after new token. Anyway, that's a really long intro. Sorry. Yeah. So maybe we can start about with like we did last time. What are you most excited about for Namada?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think I personally, I'm excited about the actual decentralization. I think in the last couple of years, especially since probably like 2020 or so, 2021, we really lost this thesis that the stuff actually needs to be decentralized. And Namada is fully decentralized, right? Like, the community runs all the validators, they run all the infrastructure, they run all the wallets. Like from day one, it's a fully decentralized thing. And I thought this was always a good idea when like networks like Near, Cosmos, Solana, Polkadot, they all launched, right? It's actually fully decentralized things. And I'm very excited to be able to go back to those roots. And again, it's also fully open source, right? It's like actually decentralized, usable open source software, which I'm super excited about. The other thing is, I think long term we'll need to experiment more with like data protection guarantees and privacy protection guarantees, because I just don't see the space getting any sort of real world traction without it. And I think Namada here is very unique because it just does one thing and does one thing well. And I think, especially in sort of the ZK world, we have the problem that we're trying to do too many things too quickly. And so my hope is that with Namada sort of the community, and like we can slowly start figuring out what specific path forward we want to take based on what people actually want to use the protocol for, right? Like it's not a lot described what the final protocol necessarily needs to look like. It's more like this basic thing works. Let's see where we can take it from here.
Christopher, what are you excited
I'll
about?
keep it short and simple. I am excited about using shielded transfers and shielded actions and seeing governance in action. I think Namada brings if you want to summarize it, basically two kind of crazy new features to the interchain world. The first is multi-asset shielded transfers along with shielded actions and shielded set rewards, and the incentive structure there to facilitate shared data protection for assets at rest, which is the most important thing. And the second is the kind of governance and public goods funding system, which is really, although Namada, uses Tendermint and speaks IBC, the interoperability protocol developed by the Cosmos ecosystem, Namada does not have Cosmos style governance. At least it has something that's quite different and has some different features like public goods funding and different mechanisms. And those were, at least, from my perspective, developed largely thanks to the learnings from Cosmos governance. So I'm hoping that some interesting dynamics, and particularly kind of decentralized, capital allocation infrastructure and stuff like this, could flourish there.
Further to that, I'm excited that people have actually paid attention and learned from some of the pains that we've had, long-standing pains that we've had in the Cosmos space, rather than just like launching another Cosmos hub mirror. We've actually we've got some new things to work with here. I'm pretty excited about that. Broadly, I'm really excited about about tackling the adoption problem. We've talked long about how we're so close to adoption, but it's been like a lot of years in saying that broadly in crypto. And I think probably like the principal reason that we don't see adoption, this is a big claim, but I think it's because no discerning organization is going to expose their most financial or their most like sensitive information, like their financial relationships. So I think that if anyone's going to be able to actually leverage these unique and powerful properties, they also have to be assured not only that their transactions are secured, but their data is secured as well. Personally, as a user, I'm so excited. It's been way too long. I have so many things fragmented everywhere because I'm trying kind of loosely to preserve some sort of privacy. I'm an Anoma backer, and when I went to make that, to send that transaction, I was like, okay, like how do I do this? And I remember Adrian just being like, do what everyone does, like use an exchange.
What's your favorite mixer right now? Mine's Kraken.
I can't remember like what, like, because I didn't want to do it with KuCoin anymore because they started using KYC. Because the problem with KYC is then like it's good until it's not. As soon as you've used the KYC exchange for doing all this, then if they go bankrupt or if someone buys them or whatever, then everything, like all of your data gets exposed. And so, it's just it's a nightmare. It's very painful, and I'm so glad that there's like this is finally on the horizon to solve this pain point in particular. I'm also really excited about actual community ownership, like exploring this as an experiment. I mean, it's AKA PGF, but like when the Cosmos Hub was running, when the Cosmos Hub was new, I was already saying like we need to, as soon as we had the community pool, I was like, we need to use this. I was the first to use the community pool, to have a proposal pass, and I used this to try to lower the barrier to entry for people to be able to get a fair shake to accessing community pool assets. And I don't know if it was I was particularly did a good job of that or not, because I don't know how well that's being used these days. But I do I do maintain that things like centralized kind of support entities like the ICF or even the Noma Foundation, we shouldn't be depending on these. They're not sustainable and they're not accountable in the way they need to be to the community at large. Whereas like using community funding can be accountable totally to the chain, and it also gives rise to like real community ownership, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
Chris, go on.
no, I was just going to say to that point, I mean, it's precisely that understanding and, some experiences of Cosmos governance, frankly, despite all of your amazing efforts, that led to a large part of what Namada has changed in the design of governance in the PGF system, particularly this idea of having public good stewards that have more, let's say, of an ability to specialize. I mean, I think one frankly, I mean, you could be charitable and call it sort of experimental discovery and less charitable and call it a design flaw. But certainly one aspect of Cosmos governance is that Cosmos style governance is that everything happens through these giant proposals, which everybody votes on, right? There's like, it's that can seem like democracy, but it's like cargo cult democracy. Like it's not democracy that anyone wants. You don't want to have a system of governance where everyone must vote on every decision. First, because voting is not actually consensus building. Voting is like tallying things and creating some amount of social legitimacy. It's helpful, but it's not really the essential part of governance. And second, because it's super inefficient. That like usually what you want to do as a community, even thinking as an organism with some kinds of different needs, is craft specific, parts, areas, public good stewards in this case, who are responsible for thinking about an area of public goods that's of concern to the Namada community and funding those. And that the community still has some kind of check, but there's this ability to specialize and make much more efficient decisions. I think another reason why, for example, it's very hard for the Cosmos Hub Treasury or something like this to get good deals, even sometimes Cosmos Hub Treasury wants to invest in stuff, even good investment deals, is that it's this giant governance function like nobody wants to deal with and that can't move quickly, etc. So I hope that this experiment might open up new directions in exactly what you're the way you're proposing here.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity if we can have functional funding. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that really defines us as an open source community, is this ability to have this these incentivization layers. And so, like, if we can do it in our own backyard, then we can probably do it in the or better in the broader space, and maybe that transposes to the real world. So that's what I'm like, real world. Sorry, the like in-person world outside of the digital world. Pretty excited about that as well.
It's also interesting, like when you look at the sort of overall L1, L2 space, no one seems to have really figured out a good structure for this, because I think most people didn't really experiment with this idea of like community stewards. And so you either ran into this problem that I think Tezos, Cosmos, and Polkadot ran into, which is everything had to go via global governance, and this just ended up being too slow and too controversial. And so like people argued over spent weeks or months arguing over like a 5K proposal. And on the other side, I think the other problem is also actually the community pools, that these treasuries ended up becoming so large in nominal terms because you couldn't spend them down fast enough, that this just kept piling on the pressure for governance to make the correct choice. And yeah, so I think having stewards and having sort of a continuous stream that stewards should start dispersing is actually going to be a much more sustainable model, where if sort of global governance wants to make large ad hoc choices, they can always, they don't have to rely on a community pool building up over time. They can just take this directly and use sort of the global token supply to mint new tokens for a specific opportunity. But so you don't have to carry all this dead weight around, which really in the end almost always comes down to proposals that just slash it all or slash 90% of it, because it's too much of a lodestone around our necks in terms of being able to move forward.
Yeah, it's bragworthy, and that only until it starts to become embarrassing that you can't allocate it effectively. Um, Okay, but we're here for a very specific reason. There have been a lot of discussions and anticipation and maybe some anxiety around this balances proposal. A lot of the discussions are happening in Discord, but there aren't. I know that that like Discord and the people who are in Discord are not necessarily the entire Namada community. There are probably a number of folks who are in there who are not in there, or who are at least not talking in there that are part of the community. Are there like when you think of the
There are also
Namada?
probably like parts on Discord where one person is 100 people. I
Right,
think both realities exist.
right, yeah. And so like when you think about the Namada, who the Namada community is, because that came up before in the last call. Um, like this is hard. I don't expect you to give me an exhaustive answer, but I'm just wondering, are there maybe some unintuitive um, parts that you would consider the Namada community that just aren't necessarily visible to people?
Actually, I
I could.
think
Oh,
just super quickly. To me, actually, I think the large part of the Mava community isn't visible on Discord necessarily, or at least they get drowned out quite easily. Because so to me, and this may be slightly controversial, and other people may have different opinions here, but to me, a community isn't like a community is a group of people I can actually interact with, right? Like, it's not going to be a million people, to me at least, right? Like I can't interact with a million people. I can interact with a couple of hundred people, and so for me, something like the folks at the Shielding Summit in Brussels, yeah, Belgium. I think those are actually a large part of an important part of the community of Namada, but I think they're probably underrepresented because a lot of these people don't like spending lots of time arguing with strangers on Discord forums, right? And so I think the internet filters for a very sort of specific subset. Um, so I think one of the parts that's probably underrepresented is more people that like to hang out in the real world. Um, yeah, I think that's and on Discord. I mean, there's also like I think it's always helpful if you've met people like at least once in real life, or at least by extension you've met someone that has met someone else in real life. I'm always very skeptical if there's sort of like someone yelling at me anywhere, like whether it's on Twitter, Discord, or forum, or just generally the internet, that I
But
have like no indirect connection to.
but
Hmm?
like something like Namada attracts like the kind of like, at least especially in the early community, like many people who actually don't want to be known in person or don't want to reveal their their personal identity. So it's interesting. I think it'll be an
Interesting.
interesting to try to surface those signals effectively, given
I
the
agree.
demographic. Yeah.
To be fair, actually, I don't know if I agree. I think Namada, like this kind of like technology attracts people that don't want to have their that don't want to be popular on Twitter, but I think they don't mind like talking to you in real life.
I
Um,
met three people in Brussels who did not want to, who like specifically were like, okay, we'll like meet you, but did not
yeah,
reveal
but
themselves to anyone else.
exactly, this is sort of my point. Like they still
Oh,
reveal
okay,
themselves to you. Like I'm
and
just,
I
I
can
think
vouch
most
for
people
them.
are more like that. That's sort of my
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Okay, Christopher, what do you think?
it's a good question. I was thinking about it last week after our space and some of the discussions. I mean, I think it's very difficult to define what community, is, and it's always there's not one community. There are many communities. Different people talk to different people. We live in a world of, I mean, pretty fragmented discourse, even with some kind of dominant platforms like Discord and Twitter. I mean, to me, from my perspective, I define the community, at least the community that I care about, is the people who participate. And participation can come in a lot of different forms, and it can come on a lot of different platforms. But, if I mean, if I see you participating, that's something that I want to engage with as a community member. If I think it's coming in good faith, even if I disagree sort of with some specific content, if I think the intention is good, then that to me is contributing to the community. Um, I think that's,
Are there
I
are
go
there
ahead.
people are there parts that you would consider the Namada community that are maybe less intuitive and maybe hard to see, that because I think for the most part when people are saying, hey, the community is saying this, it's like the people talking in there are people who are talking about things in Discord and various channels, there are people talking on the forum, but then there are other
Right.
people as well, right?
Are there unusual aspects? I mean, I've met, for example, some people in person who didn't tell me their real names, but they told me like their pseudonyms, or that they were interested in Namada or something like this. That's a little bit related to what you were talking about, and I would consider that something. I mean, coming to an in-person event is a huge commitment. Um, I think, I mean, I've seen a lot of good discussions in Discord and on the forums. Sometimes, I mean, I imagine that there are a lot of parts of the community that are just not visible, maybe especially to me, honestly. Maybe there are discussions that people want to have in private, and I think that's totally fine and even good, you know. Not
Like there
I don't want to intermediate communications, right? So I hope that there's a lot of
right
community going on that I don't know about. And it's
there,
not
there are a
exactly an
lot
answer to
of
your question, but
Well, there are a lot of balances, or there are a lot of addresses in the balances.toml. And it's interesting because, like, it's like if we say that, if we assume that that these balance or these addresses are represent members of the Namada community, um, I think like there. I mean, I actually don't know how to really put it, but like, there's a percentage of these the percentage of people who are in the Namada Discord who have addresses in Balance and Tumble, but there's also probably a large cohort that are not talking in Discord that are in balances.toml.
I bet that's true. I mean, I'm not sure that I would take balances. I don't really think that token holders are. I think they're relevant maybe to some definitions of community, but I'm not sure that I would take them to be the definition,
Right.
especially with an airdrop and stuff. I think some people may choose to change their positions or engage in market activities, especially with Namada's free market launch. And to me, one of the benefits of a free market launch is that it actually gives you a better signal for who the community is or who
That makes a lot
wants
of
to
sense. So
commit to the
there
project.
Right. So there are people who may have kind of joined, but for a different time horizon, and their free market launch gives people the opportunity to change positions with them, to join at the like, to join where they would have been excluded earlier because of um, you know private everything, like things revolving around private sales, or like difficulties participating in something like the Shielded Expedition.
Yep,
Yeah, but
exactly.
I also, to me, actually, I think when I think about sort of the community, I think whoever holds, and this is true for any network, right? Like, whoever holds tokens is a community member, um, sort of
Huh.
irrespective. Uh, I think this is sort of like, if you don't want to be part of a community, there's very little reason to hold the tokens. Um, and yeah, so but maybe this is like, I could, like, if I hold a token, I don't know, if I hold ETH, I clearly consider myself to be part of the Ethereum community, and I think anyone that holds ETH should consider themselves part of the Ethereum community. Um, and but maybe this is an extreme opinion, but I really think that like token holders end up being the community, like represent the community quite at large. I do also think, however, that community is wider than just token holders, right? I think there are a bunch of people in the Ethereum ecosystem, also in the Namada ecosystem, that don't necessarily hold tokens, but that still care about sort of the functionality of these systems and the functionality of the open source software and so on. And so I still consider them to be part of the community. So actually, I think the community is larger than just the token holders. But I think every token holder is part of the community in the end.
Oh,
Right.
interesting. I think
And I'd
I,
never
I think
point to
different,
and
but
like, and I also think like you want to be a little bit careful here on like, just like when you think about community and sort of like, just because someone is very loud doesn't mean, and we saw this in Cosmos, and like we've seen this in a lot of other ones, and I think sort of The big challenge is how do you, as a community, make yourself resilient against people with lots of time that sort of pretend to be 100 people and just like hammer a forum. And this is actually a very difficult problem that, as far as I can tell, no one has really solved it at scale.
I mean, this is the point of this sort of, in a sense, this is the point of this technology. It's anti-Sybil.
Yeah.
It's Sybil resistance. Yeah.
The problem is we haven't tied the communication channels to the actual like token holdings, let's say this way. And as a result, you get like these very distorted signals that are very like bad approximations, I think, of like the reality that's actually underneath.
I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge. That's the big challenge. And this is why I bring it up, just because, my job has been to try to hone in on a signal, to surface signals, and to hone in on some sort of like rough consensus so that we can, so that we have what we need to be able to move forward. This is the last step before things really start moving. When we have some consensus around balances.toml and parameters.toml, we can, we're off to the races as far as I'm concerned toward mainnet, and it can happen fairly quickly, within weeks, less than a month kind of thing. So surfacing that signal has had its challenges. Making sure that the people, the stakeholders, the members of the community are actually there for the conversation. And one of the hardest things I found is that the information's fragmented. So being able to synthesize the information that's kind of surfaced and being able to kind of like collect that, aggregate it into one place, so that people who weren't present for those conversations can like see what at least the outcomes are, if not the reasons as well. So one of the main things that I think people talk about, besides there's a lot of reticence about they're not like about the proposal not including lockups, and one of the concerns is alignment and founder priorities. I know that there are people who are concerned, because I think one of the reasons is the fundraise for Anoma has been happening for since what, 2020 or 2021, I think, and so that was even before Namada was conceived, and so that I think a lot of people are like, I think some of the people take that as like raising for Anoma and not Namada, signals that people have got this signal or this cue that the main priority is Anoma, that Namada is just kind of like this side experiment that no one's going to care about. What do you guys think about that?
I think this is pretty straightforward. I think there's one Anoma ecosystem, and Namada, the Namada community is part of it. Like, I don't think of this as like competitive things. I think the Namada community is a subset of people that really deeply care about data protection, privacy guarantees, that we should be trialing out right now, and we should start simple, because so far we've not seen good answers here. But really, I think about this more like Ethereum and all the things in the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I really don't think that these things are at all competitive. Actually, I think they're very complementary, because we can now actually start trying out privacy guarantees in the real world, and see where this goes, and sort of learn from this as an overall community, in order to ideally start building much more usable technology for the masses.
Should I go, Gavin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, just to offer some historical context. So we started, or Adrian and I and many other people started working on Anoma, and very soon after Namada together in 2020, 2021. And at the time, I mean, I would really describe our goals, like, to summarize things, is like make crypto real and figure out what was actually necessary to do that, to make a product and to solve the problems that we saw in the real world that we thought crypto could help with. And we sort of discovered very quickly that that really required two axes. The first axis was to make the most compelling use case of crypto that we thought existed in the world, like at all, which was shielded payments or payments with data protection, actually work as a product. That's Namada. And the other part was to make kind of intense and heterogeneous trust and some of these longer term architectural scaling questions, to take that seriously as a research project, to read the distributed systems literature, and to turn that into something that could become a future architecture. That's Sonoma. And the reason we took those two directions is that we thought that they were the critical ones. We wanted both to work on a real product and be able to provide that to people sooner rather than later, and to try and investigate the architectural questions that we thought were important. So from my perspective, they've always been synergistic. It's like coming at the same question almost from two different perspectives.
And how, like, philosophically there's alignment, but how do you see alignment, like between, I mean, they're two separate chains, they're going to each have their own separate token. How do you see
I
alignment
mean,
there?
honestly, I think that like people wouldn't necessarily be asking this question if these were just different projects more clearly built by different teams. Like if there were, Namada as one thing and Anoma as another thing, and there were no question of how they were related to each other, they would seem obviously synergistic. Like most Cosmos chains, I think people understand to be synergistic. There are more assets that you can send around. There are more, in the case especially of talking about data protection, there's more potential fuel for the shielded set, or so to speak. And from my perspective, I mean, I expect that core development of both of these projects will decentralize, of course, but us working on them both initially just makes them more synergistic.
But there's more of a connection than that, because the balances proposal connects them necessarily. The backers, the Anoma backers, are have an allocation in the balances.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
actually,
true.
I think, to double down on Chris's point, I think actually this is very beneficial. Like if you look at, I don't know, if you look at Ethereum, I think no one considers optimism to be competitive here, and like they're very synergistic things. And actually, I think in the case of Namada and Nanoma, these things are much more synergistic. And I think it's also fine that there is some overlap in sort of token holders. This may continue forward, right? Like this may diverge in the future. This may become closer in the future. This is sort of really up to the communities in the end on like how much does like how close do you want to have an overlap between like the OP holders and the ETH holders. But actually, I think in this case, as Chris was saying, I think Namada and Anoma actually are in a much better position than most of these other things, because they can be much more closely aligned with each other.
Yeah, I
Sorry, were you
mean,
going to say something? Yeah.
I was just going to say that I mean, personally, I expect there to be a lot of overlap in the communities. Like, I consider myself to be, in both. But I also think that what people want to do is, should be up to them, which is one reason why there are, two things, right? I think that provides more freedom of choice. And some people may be more interested in data protection. Some people may be more interested in other things. That's what this kind of free market launch and whole project is about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So in the simplest kind of form, why do why are Anoma backers getting 1/3 of the Namada network in this proposal?
I want to note here that like this is just a choice. It's something that we proposed. It's not, we didn't have any legal obligation to do this. The Unoma backers have supported us, honestly, and that's why. And I think that it would be, it behooves us to support those who support us. So I see it as a form of reciprocity. I think a lot of other people have also supported us, and we've gone to a lot of efforts like the RPGF program, for example, which you can read more about online, which includes allocations in the Genesis stock by by people who didn't give money to the foundation or anything like this. I also think that there will be after the network starts opportunities for people to express their preferences in various ways, and probably the membership of the community will change, and that's well and good as it should be.
Yeah, I think the sort of this proposal is really aimed to include people that care about long-term privacy guarantees, and I think like giving tokens to the Zcash community or like the ECC, and like doing and like to developers that worked on a bunch of these open source libraries as well. So on backers just seems like the best way to structure a long-term healthy community that fundamentally cares about providing long protection / privacy guarantees.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense to me. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just also want to note that, to me, part of the goal with stuff like Namada's PGF system is to actually create capital allocation options that aren't venture capital. Venture capital has some advantages, some disadvantages for the kind of thing we wanted to pursue and the way we wanted to pursue it. I think it was the right choice. But I think it was even the only choice, honestly. But I also think that there's a dearth of options available at the moment. And I'm really interested in helping support, build, and participate in protocols which bring more options on the table for large-scale capital allocation.
Same, very much the same. I know personally, I think that we'll be advocates of having similar kind of reciprocity. I think Knowable, we would like to see, Namada, that same sort of kind of alignment. Those who, since Namada, no one could invest directly into it, like with capital. People have invested invested time and effort and that sort of thing. It would be great to see, like, if we can work on something that might make sense for the Anoma community to have a similar kind of like reciprocity.
I mean, to me, reciprocity is basically, I wouldn't go so far as to say the organizing principle of like all healthy social relations, but at least let's say the organizing principle that we should think about when we're constructing, or anyone is constructing, tokenomics proposals, economies, flows within economies. The tokens should follow the actual work, right? Not the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, speaking of like allocation, like allocating outside of the standard, models that we've seen pop up, like the foundation, VC kind of. We've got a PGF account, and some of the questions that came up were about, like, if we have this great like system, or potentially great system, for allocating community funds, why put PGF, like future PGF, earmarked? Why allocate earmarked for PGF tokens to entities instead of directly to the on-chain account, like the on-chain PGF account? Like, why not just, yeah, like, it seems like I think people were wondering, why that makes sense to do that.
I can start with a super quick thing, and then Chris, you gave a good answer on the previous recording. This proposal sort of provides an infinite allocation to governments, right? And I just want to be, and this is true for all these systems, whether this is Ethereum or Bitcoin or Namada, it doesn't matter. Like, governance is fundamentally the ability to alter the economics of these systems. Like, if Bitcoin governance,
The social layer.
yes,
The social layer is the most.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like the Bitcoin social layer can print 100 trillion Bitcoin tomorrow, right? Like, there's
Exactly.
nothing that's going to come and go like, no, you're not legally allowed to do this. And so like all these proposals, including the Namada Genesis proposal, have an implied infinite allocation to governance. So it would make no sense, in my opinion, to allocate directly to governance, because governance has an infinite allocation anyway. Right, and if governance wants to tomorrow spend, I don't know, an extra 10% of the Genesis supply on something, they can. There's like nothing that's stopping governance from doing this. And actually doing it this way is sort of like a more inflation minimizing proposal, because government, like, you only allocate what governance actually can allocate, what governance actually wants to allocate. And that was sort of my short thing, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much to add to that. Mostly, I would just add that, I think it's important to kind of facilitate at least somewhat smooth transitions in ecosystems, and I see these, initial allocations to Luminara and the Enoma Foundation for future PGF as allocations that those entities should be using to help Namada transition to fully controlling and dispersing its own PGF funding. And I expect that to happen because those allocations are finite, whereas governance's ability to allocate is infinite. So in some sense, it's built into the protocol.
That makes sense to me. I know that also some people had concerns about control, because it's one thing to have these different allocations earmarked for different things, but if you add them all up, like for example, we at Knowable control Luminara, and so if you combine Knowable and Luminara, what these entities are responsible for, you have a certain amount of control over the Namada network, and then if you do the same thing, if you have the co-founders for the Noma Foundation and for Heliax, I think there were some concerns, and I think, just if I may add my own kind of thought here, is that it's probably also important to recognize that there are amounts that are marked Luminara that are distributed to individuals, not to the Luminara organization itself, and I think
Right.
that's
Okay.
probably the same, right?
I think there may be two questions here. Let me split
Sorry.
them and address them separately. No worries. I
Sure.
think the first question is, there's this category called early core contributors. And early core contributors includes a bunch of, it's over 200 individuals. Some of those individuals worked at or previously worked for Heliax, Knowable, Informal Systems, Luminara. Most of them didn't. I mean, I don't think Helix doesn't have that many. But those allocations are individual. They're not going to the organizations. So, I mean, I don't know what decisions people will make, but it's up to them. From a structure of control perspective, at least personally. I mean, maybe they're related, but they're related in the same sense that, I don't know, people in the community are generally related to each other. The second question is about governance control. And I think this is a good open discussion topic. I think the concerns you bring up are reasonable. I haven't actually seen this discussed a lot so far. Maybe I was just missing the thread. It's very possible. I didn't see anything about this on the forums, but at least personally, I'm open to discuss what people would like to see here and what's possible, stuff like this. I think this is maybe less a question of the allocations proposal and more a question of how did the first few phases of network governance work, and is there something that people might want to add in those phases? At least I'm open to discussing that, but I think we want to get more specific.
So I think all of these